J. Cole is washed. J. Cole has fallen off. J. Cole is boring. This album was disappointing. Everyone had something to say about this album, whether it was good, bad, or in between. But today, I'm telling you that after I had multiple days to digest the album for myself, I have a take that I haven't heard anyone say yet. And that is the fact that J. Cole on the fall off, this is actually the death of that character. So we're going to begin by taking a look at some of the negative takes that people have had, then take the time to acknowledge the positive, the diehard J. Cole fans that have stood up for their favorite artists, and then conclude by talking about the death of Jermaine J. Cole. So we're going to begin that as I share my screen here. I hope you'll join me for the ride. One of the first major publications to comment on this is the Joe Budden podcast, one of the biggest podcasts to be known in the hip hop space. They have a reputation of commenting on different hip hop media. Joe Budden, a former rapper, has made a name for himself in showing his credentials as being a rapper and also having some of the most detailed commentary around the major rap projects that drop. As you can see here, they claim that the album reinforced critiques that some people had about him. The theme of boring, the theme of being someone who doesn't have enough bravado to have a major career. The boring narrative was something that was alive and well throughout this album release. But for them to go as far as to say that J. Cole sounds like he's regressing and that the hype of this album set a bar so high that it was underwhelming is probably the most major negative response to this album in the hip hop media landscape. With that in mind, we have to take a look at why someone would arrive at that conclusion. J. Cole is a rapper who has been rapping this way his whole career. He's known for having one of the best pens, one of the most intricate writing abilities that you'll find in music, period. And he's done it without necessarily being what people believe to be the most braggadocious in terms of money, fame, the natural things that you imagine come with celebrity status. The other peers of his, you look at Drake, who has been the face of what a successful rap career might look like. Money, fame, celebrity status, getting into any place you want, A or S tier at a certain point, celebrity relationship when he was with Rihanna. That's what people imagine when they think of what a celebrity status career would be. J. Cole, on the other hand, is someone who we look at and he doesn't dress in expensive clothes. He really is not seen in the club scene, out on celebrity red carpets that often. And he sort of retreats back to his hometown in North Carolina until he wants to come out and release new music. So I believe that there's some people that already had a defined narrative of boring for J. Cole because of his lifestyle before this album even came out. But that's not to discount the people who had legitimate critique, people who have been there for his whole career. There's some people who have the belief that J. Cole, his rapping ability speaks for itself, but that there wasn't enough movement in this album towards a grandiose ending of his career. That it can come across as flat or something that you've already heard from him before, and that he didn't age enough to have this reflect a completely new version of him. That being said, it's hard to ignore how impressive it was for him to rap at as high of a skill level that he did on the fall off. As I insert myself into the conversation, I can see why people have that perspective. This album did not feel like what you would expect when a typical rapper says, "This is going to be my retirement album." What you expect is you're going to have the biggest features in the world, all the big names. You're going to have the greatest production that you've ever seen. But instead, what we got with the fall off was a double disc over 20 songs. The first is called Disc 29, where he speaks from the perspective of where his mind was at around the age of 29, feeling like he reached the top of the rap game and was wondering what's left for him to accomplish. Then we get the second half at age 39, where he comes to the realization that, yes, he wanted to become the most skilled rapper in the world, but what made him the most fulfilled was when he finally took the time to build his family alongside his wife and realizing that a few people in the city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he's from, being touched to the point where their lives are changed by his music was more impactful to him personally than necessarily having all the number one songs on the Billboard Top 100. And that realization is something that is not going to have as much bravado as someone coming on their last album and saying, hey, I'm the best. No one could stop me. All I believe is that I claim to be the best my whole career, and that's all you have to take away from my career, like some people might have expected. Injected within that is the fact that the last time we saw him in a major internet cultural moment was him apologizing in front of the world, getting out the way for what would end up becoming the biggest rap battle of all time, Kendrick Lamar versus Drake. J. Cole thought that this was going to be a friendly sparring session and threw out a half-hearted diss towards Kendrick Lamar, but not even 3 days later after that released, went on to a stage at his own concert in North Carolina and apologized for jumping out and doing that. And there's some people who will never forgive him for making that decision, and others who believe that thank goodness he made that decision because he would have been caught up in a firestorm and unfortunately might have suffered some deadly blows the way that Kendrick and Drake were lashing out at each other. Even the haters still had to acknowledge that J. Cole still sounded hungry on this project. He still sounded like someone whose passion lied in the art of rap itself, someone who's pursuing becoming the greatest technical skilled rapper that we've ever seen. But again, when you stretch that out to 24 songs, not everyone's going to be along with you for that journey. So we have to acknowledge some people were not ready to hear 24 songs of that. Some people just wanted a succinct 12 songs that gets that mission accomplished. One of the most liked tweets I've seen around this album was he chose to have a song on this album called What If, where it frames up a hypothetical situation where he raps from the perspective of Notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, and Tupac, and tries to make the claim that if they would have apologized to each other, they might not have lost their lives. But the perspective of the haters who look at him making that decision to put a song like that out is that he's just trying to put up a veil, a wall, a guard for the decision he made that many people disagreed with. So a simple claim of course, he made a song about them apologizing looks like him just trying to defend his own decision, not him genuinely trying to portray a story around Biggie and Tupac. But that, again, is rooted in people not understanding why he apologized, which I personally believe to be he had what seemed to be friends on both sides of a battle. He thought it would be friendly. He got a call from someone that told him things were about to get wicked, and he decided to step back and not participate. You might recall that looked like this.
Terrible. Like, it let me know how good I've been sleeping for the past 10 years. So all of that to say, man, I want to now perform the song that's a reminder to me of getting back on the right path and getting in tune with God. And the name of the song is called Love Yours.
J. Cole felt like he got thrown off his path, that this was not what he actually wanted to do, that he was peer pressured into releasing the song. And some people will not forgive him for being peer pressured into releasing the song. And some people will not forgive him for apologizing. You can't win if that's the perspective you're looking at J. Cole with. So when we can take the time to dive into the album itself, what we see is an album filled with 3, 4, 5-minute songs. In the age of TikTok and songs going viral that are barely even a minute, he's demanding that the people who do take the time to join him on this journey throughout these 20 plus songs put their time in, because this is a nearly 2-hour long album. The claim here by the account Hip Hop by the Numbers is this feels more like a pre-streaming album. One where an artist could take the time to get everything off their chest, and that's exactly what J. Cole did here with The Fall Off. 4 minutes, 5 minutes, nearly 6 minutes for the intro of the second half of this album. You need to get your popcorn ready, get comfortable, because there's a lot of intricate rapping, masterful bars that exist on this album. I'm not gonna read this essay, but J. Cole took the time to not only promote it online, but to go out and hand out CDs like they did back in the 90s for hip hop in the early 2000s, when to get yourself heard, there was no TikTok, YouTube, easy access to people. You had to give someone a CD out of your pocket and beg them to listen to you and hope that enough people enjoyed the music you handed out to them to want to continue being a fan of yours. So he extended that all the way to genuinely handing hand-to-hand albums out for the fall off. You could see here how crazy it got out in North Carolina, the amount of people that are out here. The J. Cole fans were out and about forming a mob of people just to get a look at him, let alone to actually buy the album off of him out of his trunk. This is something, if you sit and think about all the artists that you've listened to in the past decade plus, how many artists would you see at the top of their career or near it, going out in the streets handing out CDs to people? It seems so far-fetched for someone at this level of success to do that people were calling it performative. But this is something J. Cole has done throughout his whole career. From the beginning of handing out his mixtapes to just over a year ago, J. Cole did a performance in New York where he was giving out tickets for $1 to see him perform at Madison Square Garden. This has been consistent throughout his career. So when you see some people who, again, reinforce a somewhat misled narrative of him being this boring, uninteresting rapper who people are not passionate about, it's so far left of what you see when you actually step outside and look at what J. Cole fans have reflected over the past years. And there are many of them, millions, I would argue, who feel this way about him, who step outside every time he makes noise. And I'm sure that he's going to go on a sold-out tour for his last tour. There's people in America and across the world internationally alike that are awaiting for him to perform once again. On that tour, not only was he handing out CDs on the streets, but he went to one of the best college basketball games of this season when in North Carolina, Duke, UNC, one of the biggest rivalries you'll find in the sport. They took each other on this past weekend, and J. Cole was in attendance, making sure that he made his presence felt around that area, because there were probably more people that ended up going to see him handing out CDs out of a trunk of a car than went to see this game live. To show you how powerful his fan base is, there was a J. Cole fan that moved all the way from Chicago to North Carolina after seeing J. Cole perform live. Look at this fan who was celebrating J. Cole's career by going to his hometown and showing respect for the impact that J. Cole had on his life.
Mainly, he just kind of represents sometimes being seen as the underdog and coming out on top and not necessarily taking no for an ass.
That's the perspective that is so difficult to grapple with once you're successful in music. You can't be the underdog if you're the number one selling artist in the world. It's contradictory. But somehow J. Cole has captured this perspective of still being an underdog, not because he doesn't financially have a well-off lifestyle, but because he is the underdog as someone who continues to chase and chase and chase the people who preceded him, his idols, the people who were mentoring him early in his career. So the conflict that he reflects is someone who is simultaneously battling, trying to live up to the people who inspired him, but also feeling the weight of his city and the people who he interacts with in real life, putting pressure on him to continue to inspire them and continue to push them to be the best versions of themselves. And trying to straddle those two things has left him in an in-between where if you aren't one of those people who are more on the ground level, just trying to be inspired by his music, or someone way on the other end of the spectrum who just wants to hear the most elite raps that you could find, the people who live in the middle might struggle to resonate with him as much as those two ends of the spectrum. And that's where you get some of the perspectives of some people viewing him as not as talented as I believe he actually is and should be respected to be. Now, even acknowledging the potentially mixed response, he is still going to have the number one selling album. He is still going to have one of the best selling albums of his career, and he's still going to sell out these stadiums. So that just goes to show that even when we take the time to observe internet culture, we have to acknowledge that Just because you see a couple viral tweets of people liking critique of an album, a movie, a person, whatever you see that happening with, there is still a real life where a tweet going viral does not necessarily equal the impact that someone's had with their art.
This J. Cole fan decided to move to Raleigh from Chicago last year after attending the Dreamville Festival. On Friday, Tyree Dickerson drove to Fayetteville after listening to Cole's new album.
This is something that not many people can relate to. The feeling of being an artist who has moved people so much that they're willing to uproot their lives, they're willing to drop everything to experience your art because you've brought forth through your creativity such an elevated form of an offering to the human experience that it can supersede your everyday life at work, your everyday activities, watching just another show on Netflix. When your art touches people in this way, where someone's willing to literally move from Chicago to North Carolina, that goes to show that the art itself, how you feel personally about it, and how that resonates with the people that you care the most about is the real measurement for it. As I continue to evolve my personal perspective on how music should be judged, I currently am at the opinion that judging a person's album should always be, after their first one, judged against themselves. So if you're listening to The Fall Off and you think that the For Your Eyes version of him is better, you think the 2014 Forest Hills Drive version of him is better, the KOD version, whatever you want to name, you're entitled to that opinion. But when you start to make uneven parallels to a Kendrick Lamar or Drake, artists who seem to be accomplishing completely different things when they step into the studio to make an album, that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult to have an honest, intellectual conversation about the quality of an album. But I love the fact that even though there are both sides of it, I'd rather see this much conversation happen, it becoming an internet cultural moment, than to just see only people saying that it's the greatest album of all time or only people saying that it's terrible, which I've seen both extremes for albums that have existed. And usually that doesn't mean, or usually that means it's not actually a classic album. A classic album should have a large community of people who believe that it's phenomenal music, but it also should be polarizing. If you're making art, you're choosing to make it in a way that's reflective of you, and no singular person resonates with all billions of people across the world. There's going to be people who don't like it, and that's the life that you choose to live as an artist, the life that you choose to live if you put anything out in the world. Me telling you this opinion, I'm opening myself up for people to say, oh, Messiah, what you're saying is absolutely incorrect, or some people saying, we completely agree with the perspective that you're putting out there. But there's a level of confidence that has to come with putting your perspective out there. And for me, I want to engage in conversation with you. And you can let me know where there might be a nuance that I haven't even considered as I take the deep dive into the way that this album has resonated in internet culture. But now we can get to the more fun part, the people who absolutely fell in love with The Fall Off. Some people bringing about this meme, Captain, it's just the first track. But what an album, huh? What an album. How am I gonna make it 2 hours through such phenomenal music? Double XL said J. Cole is holding up the world of hip hop by himself. J. Cole has brought real rap back. J. Cole is putting the world on his back, letting you know what elite lyricism should sound like and what a real, genuine, star-studded conclusion to one of the greatest careers in hip hop history should look like. Thank you, J. Cole. Whether you think J. Cole's album was phenomenal or not, you know that a good album can change your life. There's people that are gonna come into this album and feel like, I haven't heard a great music album in a long time. Let me give J. Cole a shot, and boom, The Fall Off is exactly what they needed to hear. Whether it's him talking about the chase of becoming the best rapper of all time, whether it's him talking about his love for his wife, and he describes it as a life sentence, choosing to be with this person for the rest of eternity. Whether it's him going and reiterating his experience with hip hop, taking a lesson out of Common song, I Used to Love Her, to tell you about his relationship with hip hop, seeing people tell him throughout his life that hip hop would be like a woman that he would always be chasing but never be able to actually claim. These are the different perspectives that are shown throughout this album, with probably the one that's the most emotional of him describing a conversation with a fan at a gas station that reiterated the impact that he's had on so many people in such a passionate way that you see him pushing his vocals to the absolute maximum capacity on the song Quick Stop. That's the type of choice that you make as an artist that can polarize fans, but start to form the passionate group that's going to defend it to the death when you put out an album like this. That first listen was magical. Just trying to tune all the way in, catch every bar, and the anticipation of what is he going to talk about next, it was euphoric. Some people are already ready to make the call, Ring Ring, album of the year. And some people are ready to decline and block that number. Which side are you on? That first listen to the fall off, though, as it starts to settle in that this could be the last time we get an album from J. Cole, it was worthy of the Bad Bunny meme. Is this it? Am I satisfied? Was this the ending I was looking for? Is J. Cole satisfied? Is this a career that I'm ready to come to a close? Is this the end of J. Cole? For me and some others alike, though, this was one of the greatest conclusions that I've seen to a career. One that's worthy of bringing up the Kobe, the 60-point game at home in LA, star-studded. Every celebrity that could grab a ticket was there. J. Cole had to leave you with that. And just like it took Kobe 50 shots, I'm not saying it was perfect, but he did enough to drop the 60-point game, what the J. Cole fans wanted to end out his career. And one of the best takes that I've seen on the album is J. Cole making you feel like you grew up in Fayetteville, his hometown, while listening to the album. This was a love letter to his hometown. This was a love letter to hip hop with the way he curated this album. Which brings me to my final take that I was saving on how, as we go through this journey to understand why people believe the album to be a certain way, what the nuanced contextual take is, the fall off, after days of taking time to digest it, the fall off is the death of J. Cole. Not Jermaine, not the kid who's now one of the biggest rappers ever who wants to transition into being a wife, a father, not that guy who's going to remain in North Carolina regardless if this is the last time we get music for him. The story of J. Cole, the story that begins when he listened to his first hip hop record as a kid and ends today, that journey that is the story of someone who moved to New York to pursue hip hop, the story of someone who was a college kid just trying to make it, that was out begging in front of studios for Jay-Z to listen to his music, all the way to him being one of the highest selling musicians in the world, up to him having a #1 record, up to him being respected as one of the greatest rappers of all time by many. That journey of J. Cole reached its conclusion with the fall off. The come up was his beginning, the fall off was the end. How often do you see a story be conceived in that way where you could wrap that conclusion? So the fall off wasn't for Jermaine to tell us his deepest, darkest reflections and wisdoms that have come about throughout his life. It was exclusively to look at the career of J. Cole when he stepped out and became that character outside of his home, and the reflections he had on how that character existed, considering how J. Cole impacted people, not Jermaine, who's at home relaxing with his family. How the J. Cole that steps out and puts on a festival every year for the city of North Carolina, the J. Cole who goes out and has to have some level of braggadociousness as he has the utmost confidence in his hip hop rhyming ability. That character came to his end this past Friday. Whether he releases music again or not, I believe that that was the closing of that chapter, and any further music we get from J. Cole will be more so that Jermaine side. The guy who no longer wants to be this character, this figure, this person who is at the mercy of fans at every moment when they want to come to the conclusion that his apology was weak, when they want to come to the conclusion that he's too boring. That person can now exist as a separate entity, and we can close that chapter for the new version of him. So I'm not going to make the claim that I believe that J. Cole's career is over. I think that we still might get music from him in the future. It just might exist in a different realm, more like maybe he steps out to small hip hop clubs here and there to drop some music that he's been working on in his free time. Because someone that passionate, I don't believe will just all of a sudden lose that passion. I could see him continuing to drop little Lucy's here and there, but J. Cole is over. So with that being said, I want to declare that my opinion is the Fall Off was a perfect conclusion for him. Was it the greatest album of all time? No. Was it the greatest music you've ever heard? Maybe for some. But as someone who's a hip hop observer, someone who's engaged in the culture, I can tell you the stories he chose to tell, the way he chose to articulate himself, the Fall Off was the right ending. And I can tell you for a fact this is going to age better. The people who are negatively responding to it now, if they take the time to absorb it in the future, their perspective will change. So let me know what your thought was. Were you disappointed with the album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'd love to engage in a conversation with you. I'll respond in the comments. We can have a real dialogue about the Fall Off. I believe that the Fall Off is a beautiful ending to the story of J. Cole. Being able to leave the game on your own terms is something that everyone aspires to be able to do, but few artists have been able to successfully do it. In the case of Jay-Z, he retired multiple times. That is the story of the Fall Off, what will be one of the most internet culturally relevant albums to come out in the year of 2026. And we're off to a great start. This is only the beginning, and we got A$AP Rocky and J. Cole already dropping, both highly anticipated albums, both albums that performed well, and both artists who are now going on tour. So if you want to see them, you feel like this might be one of the few opportunities, they'll be available now.